it's just been such a unique opportunity to be able to grow with the organization. When we first
Totally.
started, we were, I think we had barely reached. I don't know. We were definitely well under 100,000 people that we've reached, and and today, we've just surpassed over reaching 45 million people, and so um, it's just been really incredible to see the growth and the scale, and starting out on a team of maybe 5 or 6 of us, and then now we're an organization over 100 plus people working in 11 countries. As we know, like the climate is changing. The world is seeing more intense rain or just too little of it. But the way that the effects of climate change and people are feeling it is usually around water, because it's either we're having floods, or extreme weather events like hurricanes, or we're seeing really long droughts that are more persistent, increase of desertification, forest fires. Um, those types of events that are happening more and more frequently, and it's really playing a toll out, especially on those that are living, in very poor communities. I mean, we are feeling, the effects of climate change. Me out in the Pacific Northwest, we're dealing with forest fires a
Right.
lot,
Right.
and air quality. But for the poor, like there's just it just impacts them so much more because they're feeling it first, and they're feeling it, the most intense, and especially in terms of their basic meeting their basic water supply and sanitation needs. So, I mean, since the beginning of the organization, Gary White originally founded the organization in 1990, and the vision is for everyone in this world to have safe access to water and sanitation. So, in many ways, we've always been playing a role on the resiliency side, of making sure that people have sustained access to water and sanitation. Um, However, there's definitely more that we can be doing. So we've had a lot of scale with a particular model called water credit, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
we sort of bridge microfinance to the water and sanitation sector. So people, for example, that can't afford the upfront costs of maybe a piped water connection to their house, or a deep borehole, to have potable water for their family, or a toilet in their house. They're able to take that loan for 300, 400, $500, depending on what they're doing, and repay that loan over time. So we've spent 15, 20 years sort of applying microfinance and seeing how we can do that, because really the biggest challenge that we've had in the sector is just there's not enough financing to go around. So I think around, which is $114 billion per year, is needed to finance water and sanitation, and we're like at a third of that. Like there's just such a big gap of what the financing needs are for water and sanitation, and that's even before factoring in the effects of climate change. One thing that's great about microfinance is it always adapts locally. So uh, climate change is obviously a global issue, but it's felt locally, and what it looks like locally is different across every different community. Like some communities may be facing more and more drought and then intensive rains, and others may be facing sea level rising, for example. And so one thing that has to particularly with these local effects of climate change, people have to really have smart solutions that work well for the climate changes that are happening in their environment. And so being able to make those choices that works best for individual households is really important. But I also think people are, really recognize the sheer urgency and massive size of the problems that we're talking about, and recognizing that there's just simply not enough philanthropic capital to solve the crises that are going on, and so we have to figure out how to use the markets that are that are global and that are local,
Yeah.
in order to keep that capital coming in, and it's looking at it through, it's applying kind of market forces but with a social mission.
Water.org was such an interesting guest for us to have as our episode 1. because they're nonprofit, and most people don't consider that a nonprofit is going to have all of the business insight that you need to be growing and scaling and having to make all of those kinds of considerations. However, I think they have to do it a little bit more. They have to be hyper efficient, hyper effective in the decisions that they're making, how they're using the resources they have available. And they were incredibly creative in the way that they've started to use microfinance applied to their causes. And I just found that conversation so insightful. Heather was incredible. And I would highly, highly recommend you take a listen to the full episode on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you like to listen. We're everywhere. But yeah, subscribe to the channel, follow along, subscribe to any of the podcast platforms. Definitely keep up with this because, kicking off with such an incredible brand and an amazing guest talking about insights, innovation, how they're approaching things differently, we have some really big stuff ahead. This is just incredible.